This is the E-commerce Edge podcast with your host, Jason Greenwood. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of The Pod. It is my absolute pleasure to welcome our next incredible guest, Mr. Alex YANCHER from Passport. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Great to be here.
It is awesome to have you along for the ride with me today. You're a co-founder and CEO of Passport, and you've been running the business for nearly 9 years now. But before we get into what Passport is and does and all the nitty-gritty of that, why don't you tell us how you came to be in this wonderful world of digital and e-com to begin with?
Yeah, absolutely. A little bit of a roundabout way, but I'm here now.
As most of us do that work in this industry, it's very rarely is it a straight line for us.
Yeah, totally. When I look back at my career, so I started off as an investment banker at Morgan Stanley. So, yeah, worked in New York and then worked in LA for a few years. And after that, I joined Facebook. And this is back in 2010.
So just a little
So,
company called Facebook.
yeah, exactly. It felt like a big company, but it was only 700 people at the time that I joined. And now I really felt like my chance at a big payout because I joined when they were valued at like 29 billion or something like that. And everybody thought that they had overpaid. And I was like, you know what, this is a pretty incredible experience. It's growing so fast. And a lot of my Morgan Stanley friends joined and I actually got hired. My manager was my previous manager at Morgan Stanley. So he took me with him. And I worked there for a couple of years. I loved it. It was a great experience. And while at Facebook, I met my co-founder. I had the entrepreneurial itch. And I met my co-founder, this guy named Mustafa, who's originally from Egypt, really great guy, super smart. He was an engineer there. I was on the business side, not as smart. And he and I teamed up. He was the CEO. That's why he was the CEO, and I was the lowly COO, two-person startup. Anyways, so he's the CEO, and we started a company that helped people abroad buy products from the US. This is obviously after our Facebook days and all that. And we basically had a universal shopping cart. So somebody could take a link. The company was called Links. So play on words, you get it. So somebody would take a link to a product that they want to buy on, like, say, Etsy or Allbirds or whatever. They would drop it into our universal cart. They'd buy the product from us. So they paid for the product, the shipping, our fees for transacting here, all of that. We would go onto that website. So we would go on to Etsy and Allbirds, put in our credit card information, and for the address, we would put in a Delaware warehouse. Okay. Delaware's one of the only tax-free states in the US. So we had a warehouse in Delaware, and all of the merchandise would go to that warehouse in Delaware, and that's when we would take over. So then we would consolidate. All of the UAE packages would go here, all of the Kazakhstan packages would go here, all of that. So we would segregate it by country that way. And I ran ops. I was at the warehouse a lot, and I had to figure out how to ship product, big or small, cheap or expensive, all over the world. And in running the operations this was already a cross-border company. And I was new because I had done investment banking, Facebook. Mustafa also, like, what does he know about international shipping other than going into like your local DHL store or something like that? And we learned a lot. And one of my main takeaways, I came to this conclusion pretty early on, is that the company that does your physical logistics is not the same company. This is like over 10 years ago. It's not the same company that's like calculating. So doing your physical logistics, it's also the same company that clears customs for you. So sends you an invoice for the shipping and for the duty and tax. But it's not the company that's calculating your duties and tax in your shopping cart. And at first I was like, that's a real gap. That's a real gap for DHL and FedEx. They're missing out on a big opportunity, because what happens is the company that's calculating the duties and tax, it's giving you one number, and then DHL and FedEx are invoicing you for another number. And who's right? And now you're starting to play this game of one says the other one's wrong, whatever. So immediately, this is like first few months in the job, I was like, oh, aha moment. This should be one company. Like, the company that does your like physical logistics and clears customs for you should also be the company that gives you the software to calculate the duties and tax in the cart. And then the things start to pile on. Okay, that's just one example. There's also like regulatory work and compliance that you need with international shipping. Basically, there's a lot more than the physical logistics that goes into having a successful international experience. And I would say that's where Passport was really born. I really realized at the time that there's a opening in the market to build a company that solves international for brands from beginning to end, and also does the shipping because that's such a big component to it. So start a Passport. Oh, I don't
But
hear you,
yeah,
Jason.
what a amazing story, almost like a scratching an itch story where you went, okay, I feel this pain firsthand. I've helped with aspects of this pain, but I haven't helped with the end-to-end solution to deal with this pain. And how much of what you do at Passport was modeled on some other services in the market, both existing and former services in the market? When we think about cross border and all the complexity associated with that, there are certain companies that try to take either part or all of that pain away. Pitney Bowes, famously, their cross border delivery service was one of those services they shut down famously in 2024. But there's been others. And so, I guess what I'm trying to say is multiple different companies have tried to take a pretty good run at this. And it's hard because it's a moving target, right? It's a moving target from a customs perspective. It's a moving target from a tariffs perspective. It's a moving target from a taxation perspective. It's a moving target from a first, middle, and last mile carrier perspective. It's a moving target from, how do we make sure we're profitable when we're clipping the ticket? In what scenarios do we need to be the seller of record versus effectively just a freight broker? What scenarios do we need to just be, because a lot of what you do would typically fall under the classical definition of a freight forwarder, but you're taking much more responsibility as well. So you're plugging directly into the customer experience, you're plugging directly into the merchant experience, and you're taking responsibility for making sure that the goods actually get into the customer's hands that they've ordered, and making sure that they don't get any massively rude surprises when they receive the goods, and making sure that at least if we tell them that their duty is prepaid, or we tell them that their taxes are prepaid, or whatever. I even got a rude awakening here in Mexico yesterday when I received a parcel from FedEx that I bought through Amazon. Now,
Hmm.
in theory, I paid all my impuestos because I live here in Mexico. So, in theory, I paid all my impuestos, I paid all my taxes, I paid all my duties, I paid everything through Amazon. In theory. Now, what happened when FedEx turned up at my doorstep to deliver my Amazon parcel? Mr. Jason Greenwood, you owe us 226 pesos for aduana fees. So this is the local customs fees, right? Now, that's very rare. 9 times out of 10, Amazon is very good. And if they say you've paid everything, you've paid everything. But even they occasionally get it wrong. And
Hmm.
so if Amazon occasionally gets it wrong, I
Hmm.
can imagine that lots of other merchants
Yeah.
routinely get it wrong. And
Yeah.
oftentimes that leads to a pretty crappy customer experience on receipt of the goods, where maybe the local customs department sends them an email and says, oh, by the way, you need to pay $100 worth of customs and then we'll release your parcel for you. Or they don't tell you that the customs duty is due because they don't know how to get a hold of you because they've only got your physical address. And what do? They wait 2 weeks or whatever, and then they send it back to the shipper, whoever dispatched it, or they destroy the goods. So there's lots of scenarios here where shipments can slip through the cracks of international. There's so many nuances of international trade that it feels like an absolute minefield for merchants that it looks like you're trying to solve.
It is. Yeah. No, totally. Elon Musk has that famous quote: "You don't do things because they're easy. You do things because you think they're going to be easy."
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so when you
So,
looked out in the market, did you say, look, nobody's doing this in the way we think it should be done, so we're going to bloody do it?
yeah. And frankly speaking, the trick, if there is a trick to this, is to be hyper focused on just a few things and be okay not being everything for everybody all at once. How does that manifest itself? Well, we get merchants that are like, "Oh, hey, I ship from China, from Hong Kong. Can you help me?" Sorry, can't help you. We don't do China, Hong Kong to US. We just don't do that. "Oh, I have B2B stuff. I need help shipping from US to Canada to restock my Amazon. Can you help me with my B2B? Sorry, we don't do B2B. We just do D2C parcel. Like, okay, boom, already knocked out like huge amounts of brain damage and work and stuff like that, right? And then another thing, I would say this is not the case anymore for anybody who's listening, but in the beginning, we weren't the best for like high value goods. And we were pretty focused on the kind of slower, cheaper service on the shipping and logistics side. And we didn't have that much functionality around returns or insurance or something like that. So another thing where I would get I actually remember this. I had an advisor who was pretty close to Tiffany's. And he was like, "Hey, I'm going to get you an intro to the COO of Tiffany's. You're going to crush it." I'm like, "No, I'm not. And please don't make the intro. It's going to be, I
Yeah.
mean, I'm happy to talk to them and give them advice, but we're not a fit. We're not a fit for what the price point that Tiffany's is selling at." Now, if any COO of Tiffany's is listening, we're definitely a fit now. But at the beginning, we weren't. And then over the years, you start to build up demand over the things that you don't do, either like a feature or a service for your core customers or increasing your addressable opportunity. It took us 8 years to essentially launch a new country, and we just launched UK. Like a month ago, we launched UK outbound. We lost a lot of business because we just weren't willing to do more than we felt like we can handle, or to add a lot of unfocused work to our plate, even when there were some business opportunities behind it. But there obviously comes a point where, the business opportunity, the organization size, it allows for growth and an addressable opportunity expansion. But that's how we did it in the beginning. In the beginning, we had this transition, Jason, where like maybe the first, call it 4 years of Passport, let's say, we were like a shipping carrier, like a shipping consolidator to be more specific. So not quite a freight forwarder, not quite a shipping carrier like an integrator, but like a shipping consolidator. That's really like the name of the industry that we were in. We were that, and we differentiated with technology. So we were that, but we also did what you were describing, like the duty and tax calculation up front. And that was like a key unlock for us, and some other internationalization in the cart. And then about 3 or 4 years ago, we built up so many capabilities around things like our seller of record service, around localized pricing and currencies and all of those things. We did so much work around it that at some point we realized that we're actually not a shipping carrier or consolidator anymore. We're a internationalization technology company, and we differentiate with shipping. So it used to be a shipping company that differentiates with technology. Now a technology company that differentiates with shipping. And that's where I'd say we're at now. So we do just as much on the software side of things in working with somebody's card, and we have APIs and all of that. And it's just as big of a core competency as having our own vertically integrated shipping service is. And yeah, that's where we're at. There's still a bunch of things we don't do, and that's still our trick, is that we shy away from things that we know we can't do, and we're very honest with customers. We don't try to string people along only for them to find out later that there's like vaporware. That's like not a great way, for us at least, to conduct business in the industry.
And what is the typical nexus of a customer to need you, find you, and open up a dialogue with you about the services that you offer? And let me contextualize that question
Sure.
a little bit.
Yeah.
Because when business, especially e-commerce businesses, when they're small and they're starting out, even up to 20, $30 million a year, even if they're shipping internationally, oftentimes what they will do is I see them take one of three routes. They will either set flat rates or matrix rates for domestic versus international shipments, if they can reasonably predict that some shipments they're going to lose money on, some shipments they're going to win money on, and it all comes out in the wash to where at least it's cost neutral to the business to ship goods. Sometimes they'll charge, sometimes it'll be free, sometimes they'll set a free shipping threshold, but somewhere along the way it becomes a a rationalization to try to strike a balance between covering all of our shipping costs, or maybe even making a little bit of money on it, and creating a great customer experience where the customer doesn't get pissed off and frustrated and can't really figure out why they're paying what they're paying for shipping. Then, or it'll either be that, Or they'll do one of two other things. They'll either try to connect via integrations to each of their domestic and international carriers directly via API so that they can fetch a rate from them, either on their account or a carrier aggregator account, and fetch the rate down, present that to the customer, maybe add a surcharge, maybe not, whatever it is, present that to the customer along with the service level and let the customer decide. The final one is working with a full blown local, domestic, and international courier aggregator, which also manages the consignments. They lodge the consignments with the carrier. They are the ones that connect to the carrier's APIs. So you only have one API to connect to. You present the options to the customer based on the cart contents, the originating address, the destination address, and the volumetric weight of the shipment. And Bob's your uncle. You do the personalization in the cart, and you're off to the races. And oftentimes, when you're little or when you're new and you don't know that services like you exist, you might think that's the only way, those are the only options you have as a business, right? You might not understand what being the seller of record means because you don't realize that you are the seller of record. You just think, of course I'm the seller of record. If I was to be asked if I'm the seller of record, of course I am. I'm the person selling the damn goods and I'm the person getting paid for the damn goods.
Who's the seller of record?
Yeah, who else
Yeah,
would be?
yeah.
And maybe you understand Amazon. Maybe you understand selling through TikTok Shop or something like that with some sort of middleware. But really, you just know, okay, I bring in the goods, or maybe I have a 3PL that I'm working with who holds the goods for me. They download the orders, they ship the damn goods to my customer, and I get a bill at the end of the month for my consolidated freight costs. That might be all. At what point of maturity or needs do they need somebody like you and actually come to the realization that they do?
Yeah, great question. We're pretty flexible, first of all, at Passport. And we work with some very large accounts that do a billion in sales. And we work with some smaller accounts that are just getting started. The dynamic that you're describing, we call that flat rate shipping versus live rate. Live rate is where if somebody from Zimbabwe buys it and it's very expensive to ship to Zimbabwe, it'll surface a rate of $92 or something like that. Versus Canada, it'll be like $9. So the solution can accommodate for different sizes, where what the country it's going to is, and surface the correct rate so the brand can feel like they're not really going to be out any money. There could be some discrepancies here or there, but largely live rate is the, I would say, for smaller merchants, they're just getting started. That's the one that removes the most headaches because they don't need to stress about getting something wrong, or they don't really know where their international sales are going to be coming from. So they largely prefer live rate. But a very quick graduation after that is the flat rate, because that ultimately is what drives higher conversion rates, all things being equal. So why not get a number that's a aesthetically pleasing number that drives higher conversion rates, call it $5, $10. And then you could start doing some A/B tests around it. You can try and see how important free shipping is in your for your specific product category, or for your business specifically. But zero is also a flat rate. And free shipping is really a very powerful marketing message, and some brands build their identity around free shipping and no extra fees and all of that kind of stuff. So free shipping is actually a very important component, and they found a lot of success with it in the US. So why not carry it over into other markets? Maybe shipping is a little bit more expensive, but fine, you could raise your price accordingly. For those accounts, ideally you're doing at least a million international. And for those accounts, we come in and we try to be pretty hands-on and help you calculate your contribution margin, how to think about it in terms of your product cost, and then set you up with, we have a great partnership with a company called IntelliGems to essentially A/B test your theory that free shipping, while it's going to cost you some contribution margin, but the conversion rate is going to be so much more as to justify that drop in conversion rate. Or you could bake in some of that loss into the price of the good. So increase your prices accordingly. And again, like, there's theories here, and different product categories and different price points have slightly different results in terms of what's best. But suffice to say, it's worth checking, and you need to have the volume in order to check, but it's worth checking. And that's where we really come in. So when you're ready to either get started 0 to 1, or you're ready to do one of two things, like really turn up the notch on international and grow it and make it a meaningful part of your business, or you're ready to find some meaningful profits in your business. So you're actually doing pretty well internationally, but for some reason, when your CFO looks at the numbers, you're actually losing on international. What's going on? We could come in and we could help put in some margin busting processes and plans into place where, yeah, you might increase your prices here or there, but conversion rates are going to maybe decrease just a little bit, but at least you'll be on a path to profitability with the service that we have.
And where does seller of record transference start to make sense for most international merchants that are like, maybe they've, I don't know, maybe they've been in business for a decade. They've only ever historically sold to the US, but they're just starting to get so many international inquiries. They're like, wow, well, there's a number of ways we could approach this. We could sell on international marketplaces. We could work with a 3PL in country, biggest export market countries where we effectively would can transship under bond in those countries. We could work with an international freight forwarder from our home country and warehouse. There's you could slice and dice this 100 different ways. But if I've been in business for a decade in the U.S., my business is solid, it's stable, it's growing, but it's not growing at the rate it maybe was in the first 3 years. But I'm getting lots of international inquiries, and now I'm thinking about going international. Apart from me reaching out to DHL and FedEx and saying, "Hey, look, we're thinking about going international. How can you help us?" Because that feels like a very difficult conversation to have if you have no idea where to even begin with those conversations. Where do you normally start to step in and say, "Look, we can own these 5 things for you to make going international so much easier"?
Great question. So let's talk about seller of record specifically. It's a very specific solution that we actually have that term trademarked, seller of record. And we were the first that came to market with it when Brexit first happened. Okay. So the reason for seller of record in the first place, we only came to market with it, what is it now, 4 years ago or something like that, because the EU and UK both at the same time implemented. Actually, one was first. I can't remember which one was first, but one very quickly followed suit. Implemented a new rule for cross-border e-commerce into those markets. Okay, and the rule was that even if you sell 1 cent into EU or UK, there's a $0 threshold. So as long as you sell even $1, 1 cent into those markets, you have to register. Let's just talk about UK, for example. You have to register with HMRC. That's their version of IRS.
Yeah,
Have a
Her Majesty's Revenue Collection.
That's what it is. That's what it is. That's right. Exactly. That's right. Her Majesty's. That's right. That is a obligation that was put into place about 4 years ago, and it requires every single merchant. So you as a merchant that you barely sell anything, you sell one a year or something like that. Technically speaking, I don't know what the enforcement is. That's a different story. But technically speaking, the requirement is that you register for a VAT ID number, you collect VAT in your cart, and then you remit VAT on a regular basis to Her Majesty's Revenue Collection. Okay.
There's no de minimis basically in that world.
That's right. That's right. There's no de minimis. There's no de minimis. You have to do it. Same story for EU. It's a little bit more complicated for Australia. There is a certain threshold, like you have to sell. I think the number is $100,000 Australian dollars worth of goods for you to have a registration with
Right.
Australia. Recently, Malaysia, like a handful of other countries, where for how much you sell, you have to have a VAT number, like a local business. To a local business, if you were to start a business locally in the, you have to have a VAT number, collect that VAT, and remit that VAT. It's a lot. It's a lot to go on these governmental systems. And like I said, it's not just UK. It's like UK, EU, Australia, New Zealand, Malaysia, Singapore, Norway, Switzerland, and there's a handful more that I can't remember off the top of my head. And the idea that you're going to go in and maintain these registrations, pay on a quarterly basis, have to deal with being audited. It's like different time zones, oftentimes different language. It's just too much. So we developed a solution, which is a seller of record. Basically, we stand in your place in the eyes of those local governments, and we have that VAT registration. We're doing it on behalf of many merchants. So for us, it's worth it to dedicate a person, and we have a whole team essentially that does this, that collects, remits, makes sure it's right, handles any inquiries from the local governments, and basically helps the governments collect the correct amount of VAT. And it helps merchants save on all this extra admin work that they don't want to be dealing with.
But how do you insert yourself into that relationship so that you become the seller of record for orders going to those countries?
Yeah, it's really just a legal framework. So we have a legal agreement with the brand and, in effect, with the consumer that the quote unquote seller of record for this purchase, for this transaction, as it relates to VAT collection and remittance, is for Passport. And it's on Passport's local registration with UK on our VAT ID number. And then for the most part, we're offering the service as part of our shipping service as well. So we actually capture a lot of the data that we need because we're also the carrier and we're clearing customs. So we know what the order value is, we know where it's going, where it's coming from, all of that. But in some cases where we're not part of the shipping flow, and in some cases we're not, we collect that data from the cart and we just do that via our app.
Wow, amazing. Amazing. And how far up the chain do you go? Obviously, you don't have your own planes. I'm guessing you probably don't have your own planes. You probably don't have your own ships. You probably don't have your local lorry driver in downtown London, Piccadilly Circus, to deliver parcels downtown. So, at what point do you begin and end from actually the shipping element of things? Are you go as far as the 3PL typically would, or do you go further than that? What elements of the shipping do you typically own yourself versus working with a contract freight company, etc.?
Totally. Yeah. So we start off where the 3PL ends. Most of our brands work with direct to consumer 3PLs, which means in effect, we end up working with 3PLs. I think at this point, we work with around 180 3PLs in the US and UK. And they'll treat us, at least in their four walls, as they do with any other carrier. They have a FedEx rate card and they print FedEx labels. Great. They're going to have a Passport rate card and they're going to print Passport labels. And FedEx is going to pick up the FedEx packages and Passport is going to pick up the Passport packages. No, it is not a Passport branded FTL truck that's coming. The first mile that we have to pick up from the 3PLs and from the self-fulfill brands, it's highly regional, highly dependent on where that warehouse is. For the most part, we use local providers. Those are usually the most reliable and the cheapest options. And then so that truck, which is in our network, so we call it, our truck to a certain extent. It's in our network. It's one of our trusted partners. It will deliver to a Passport warehouse where our employees will get the packages. They'll sort the package by country and by service level, and in some cases, even by last mile carrier in that country. So we work with, call it half a dozen last mile providers in Canada, for example, the Intelcoms of the world, Canada Post of the world, right? We have our own internal formula and matrix where we use the best carrier given the price, given the transit time, given the reliability for this particular part of the country. And again, obviously, it's not a Passport person with a Passport shirt. These are last mile providers that are in our network. And that's how we do it. The part that we really own is the US based consolidation centers. Our employees, our software, our warehouses, and then we have middle mile trucks or air freight. Again, not our own airplane, but our own customs and our own freight relationships with airlines. And then we'll put cargo there, we'll inject into a local last mile network. Like I said, in Canada, it's very many. In some countries where we don't have that much volume, we'll be single sourced and use just one provider in that particular country.
I'm guessing in those scenarios, it's like the flag carrier, the internet local flag carrier that can get to every address in the country.
The postal service there. Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
so it might be
Kazakhstan
It
Post.
might be New Zealand Post in New Zealand, for
Yeah.
example.
So even Australia Post, they're a very popular provider. We use other carriers in Australia, but
Yep.
Australia Post is a big part of it, for sure.
Or track and some of the other major
Yeah,
industry.
you know it. Yeah,
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 I lived in
exactly.
New Zealand for almost 30 years, so yeah,
Oh, you
know
did? Oh,
Australia and New Zealand very well. Yeah,
gotcha. That's why you say
absolutely.
Lori. Got it.
Yeah,
Okay,
well,
that
yeah,
explains it.
that's more of a UK thing, but yeah,
That's
that's why I
UK.
use the term lorry in relation to the UK because that's the term they use. But yeah, super interesting. And for you guys, what if anything are your customers asking you to own and be responsible for that you aren't yet responsible for, but that you're going, okay, we don't do that today, but look out 6 months from now and we probably will.
I wouldn't say look out 6 months ago, but customers always ask us if we could do their US shipping and
So basically
logistics.
own all their freight, domestic or international.
Yeah, and we don't really wanna do that, to be honest. I don't see that ever happening. We're called Passport. We wanna be international, but that's something I think that we've considered doing B2B, and up until now, we haven't really. We just do D2C parcel.
Yeah. So in individual parcels as opposed to cartons, pallets, and containers.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, and B2B, just you feel like the margins there are just too thin to be able to make it work.
It's not even about the margins, to be honest. I think that maybe just based on the kind of brands that we've been going after, at least as it relates to international, 90% of their business is D2C anyways. There's other providers and we can help out with those. So the marginal value add that we can bring, coupled where we feel like being the best and being what we want to be known for, that's the majority of the revenue, the vast majority of the revenue anyways. That's been the driving decision for it.
And so in those scenarios, would you typically just point, let's say a big B2B reached out to you and you're like, nah, we really just, this is just not our focus. Would you then turn around and typically point them at just like a freight forwarder? Would that be that would be who they would typically want to deal with at volume, at scale to help them with some of that internationalization of trade?
Yeah, it's a good question. What is B2B and where do we, what is our cutoff? I think our technical cutoff for most countries and service levels is 70 pounds.
Yeah.
So a lot of B2B is under 70 pounds and we can still do it. And frankly speaking, we do. We
Yeah.
still do. We end up doing like a 30-pound box of 20 things in it and all that. So we do that. I think that the sweet spot of where, in theory, we would play is between 70 pounds and call it 250, something like that.
Hmm.
After 250, that's where the dead zone is. That's where there's not that many good options and it's hard to find somebody.
As you carriers at that stage, and yeah, it gets
Yeah, it gets messy. Like one person can't pick it up. You
yep,
need like a team.
forklift, a pallet, or
Or
whatever.
yeah, exactly. Some require like a special receiving dock, so it's just a little bit more complicated.
Yep.
But the traditional like pallets and freights and freight and all of that, yeah, that's like a freight forwarder at the end of the day. And we don't do that. We don't do freight forwarding. What's the point?
Yeah. Yeah. And so you operate as a service in the US. We now know you do it from origination in the UK and EU. Where next for you guys do you want to have outbound service capabilities?
So let me correct just one part. We don't do EU outbound. We
Okay.
do UK outbound. And yeah, it's actually interesting what happened. We used to do Canada outbound. And actually we still do Canada outbound, but only with FedEx
Okay.
as our like under the hood provider.
Yep.
And the reason we use FedEx, we used to have a great service out of Canada and we're rebuilding it, but we used to transship it through the US. And
Ah,
when the de
okay.
minimis went away, for China at
Doesn't work.
least, it doesn't work anymore. Yeah, when you bring it in, you have to pay you have to pay US duties
Even if it's
on the
transshipped.
items, even if it's transshipped. Yeah, especially if it's transshipped.
Yeah, well,
you have to,
especially Trump actually just mentioned this week that he was going to whack extra tariffs on countries that vendors that get caught transshipping.
yeah, exactly. This is a little bit different. That's more like shipping Chinese made goods through like Vietnam or
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah.
This is like something that is going to Australia from Canada and you're shipping it through the US. So you technically can get a refund on those US duties, but it's a hassle. And there's going to be some like fee slippage and there's going to be some delays at the border. And we basically decided to refactor our whole Canada outbound shipping and just do Canada outbound directly from Canada.
Yep.
So have our airlift from Toronto. So we're working on that. So maybe come January, of 2026, we're going to do Canada outbound. That's a great market. Canada's a great market, and again, we do it, but we do it with FedEx as a partner. But we're building our own proprietary solution, Canada outbound, directly from Canada, because yeah, again, we used to do it very well, but it used to go through the US. EU's on the roadmap, Australia's on the roadmap, both likely H2 2026. Canada's next for us because we already had volume and we were already doing it. We just had to pause. But UK and US outbound today.
Wow. Okay. Amazing. And how do you guys make your money? Is it a per parcel fee? Is it a breakdown of fees where you clip the ticket at kind of every step along the way? How do you typically do you charge a fixed SaaS fee for just the API provision? How do you guys break it down? How you make your money?
We make money two ways. One is we act as a traditional shipping carrier, right?
Yep.
And we have a rate card and we have margin in that rate card.
Yep.
And we compete directly with DHL and other
Yep.
international providers. Okay, so that's one way. The other way is we have this very rich suite of internationalization solutions, and we
Hmm.
charge a percentage of the order value as a fee for that.
Sure. And I guess obviously where you're, for example, the merchant of record, the percentage that you charge is greater than if you're really just moving the goods.
Yeah, exactly. We operate on two models, Jason. I'm not sure if we talked about this early on, but I think it's good for your audience to understand our two models. So one model is cross border.
Hmm.
So you're in the US, you ship it cross border, okay? We'll be the carrier for you and we'll do the internationalization in your card and so forth, everything that I talked about, okay? The second model is meant for bigger merchants. So we have some huge major accounts like Hexclad that are doing hundreds of millions of revenue.
They're killing it.
They're killing it, yeah. And that model is we set up local operations in country for you. Okay.
Right.
So in that case, Hexclad or other merchants like that will use us as your merchant of record and your importer of record, and we'll do local 3PL and logistics management, providing you like a completely turnkey solution for you to be operating locally in the UK, in Canada, in Australia, in New Zealand, in Mexico. Those are all the markets that we are, and in EU. Those are all the markets that we operate in. And we make money that way also just as a percentage of the sale as a fee.
And in that world, you're not shipping individual shipments then. That you actually are acting almost like a local 3PL in that capacity, and they might ship a whole container or two containers or 10 containers or a container a month or whatever it is to that facility, your facility in market, warehouse it locally, and then as the orders come in, then you'll fulfill from that local inventory. Is that typically the model?
Yeah, precisely. Yeah. We're 3PL agnostic, meaning a brand that has a lot of success with 3PLA here in US and they have a branch in UK. We say, great, use that 3PL in UK. So whatever is easiest for a brand to be able to get going, the key unlock that we provide is we provide that local entity
Local nexus,
for
local
them to
tax
be able
nexus
to,
as well.
yeah, for them to be able to transact locally. Again, just another example for why somebody doesn't want to create like a registration with HMRC, get that VAT number, get all that kind of stuff, create corporate tax nexus, like go through all that hassle when we can stand in your shoes and handle all of that.
Amazing, amazing. What's next for you? What are you seeing in the market? Obviously, tariffs are wild. They're all over the show and they're changing seemingly daily. I understand why it's happening, but presumably that creates some extra challenges for you in terms of getting the latest updates and getting the latest updated feeds from customs, et cetera, both internationally and domestically. It feels like that that is it's like a full-time job at the moment to make sure you're keeping up with all that and making sure everybody's paying what they're supposed to be paying when they're supposed to be paying it, right?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Oh, the you brought it up. The U.S. tariffs, the de minimis went away.
Yeah.
It's technically going away August 29th. So still here for non-China country of origin, but it's going away very soon. I would say that finding solutions for US for non-American brands. So ironically, like our whole business up until this day has been essentially American and Canadian brands that want to go global. Outside global means for these brands outside of US, outside of Canada. Okay. Now our one of our most popular products is a solution that helps non-American brands. So like a UK based brand, a Australian brand, a Dutch brand, etc., set up local operations in the US
Right.
and handle the US because the way the world worked like a week ago is different than it works now. Before, you're highly incentivized to ship product directly from your home country or set up even like a something in Mexico or in Canada and ship parcels into US under de minimis. You are actually disincentivized of having local operations in the US, and that has completely, utterly gone away. So
Yes.
now every single brand, and about, call it, I don't know what the number is, maybe 15, 20% of all of e commerce is rethinking how they do operations because this arbitrage has gone away. And we're there to help at Passport. We're there to help navigate.
Wow, what a big change. Listen, this has been fascinating. I'm fond of saying on this podcast, and I've said it many times, e-commerce is mostly just logistics with a pretty face. And I've always been, up until I really started getting into the nitty-gritty of internal logistics, international logistics, etc., and helped a brand that I was working inside of replatform everything internally with their own warehouse systems, put in a new WMS, put in a carouseling system, put in all sorts of cool internal logistics technology. Once I started getting involved in that, WMSs and IMSs and OMSs, and got really into the nitty gritty of how something gets from a supplier to a customer and every little step in between. Until I got involved in that, I was kind of like, that's boring crap. So that's just operational stuff that I don't really need to know about. But once I really got into it and immersed in it, it was like, this is so fascinating. And it is so incredible how warehouse operations are being automated at a great rate of knots with robotics and hydraulic systems that go up pallet racking and grab totes and do to camera. It used to be pick to light, wave picking, and everything else, and now it's robotics with cameras. And so the whole logistics world is just incredibly fascinating. And so it's you as someone who's playing a massive part in this. It's just fascinating to hear how you do what you do and why you came to be in existence to help merchants do better and be better internationally. So thank you for sharing your knowledge, your experience with me, and I wish you every success with Passport. But if people want to get a hold of you, I'll drop a link to your LinkedIn profile and the website in the show notes. But other than that, how do you like people to reach out and get a hold of you and talk all things international and cross border?
Yeah, I would say your audience should feel free to email me, alex at passportglobal.com. I'm also on X, so drop in my X
Profile.
handle
Yep.
profile. Yeah, Alex Yancher, just my name. Yeah, no, this has been great, Jason. Thank you so much for having me on.
My pleasure. Listen, now as we do come down to the end of our time together, this is where I get to quickly flip the script, hand the microphone over to you. Let you ask me one question, any question you like. It can be personal or professional. So, Mr. Alex Yancher from Passport, what is your question for me today?
I'm really digging your shirt.
Thank
Tell me a
you.
little bit about your shirt and you're a fan of Star Wars.
Yeah, look, it's funny. This one is an interesting one. I would say that I'm not like a super Star Wars head like some people are. Like we've got a neighbor that lives just down from us, and he is massively into Star Wars, and he's got memorabilia all over his house. I'm certainly not that. I actually got this T-shirt. Funnily enough, funny story. I had a friend who was an American who was living in New Zealand at the same time I was. We became fast friends. We met through business. We became fast friends, and then he married a local Kiwi girl who was actually Swiss Kiwi, and they were moving back to Switzerland to be closer to
Mm,
her family because they were having kids and they wanted to be close to the
mm,
grandparents. And he was like, "Look, I can only take half my wardrobe with me. So I'm going to leave the
mm,
rest behind. Is there anything you want from here?" And I looked in his
mm.
wardrobe and I saw this shirt and I thought, "That's like the coolest Darth Vader shirt I've ever seen." And I'm like, "I want that one." And that's how I came by this
Oh,
shirt.
it is a cool one, Jason. Cool.
Alex, thank you so
All
much for your
right.
time. I super appreciate it. We'll look forward to speaking with you again soon. Are you a B2B or D2C e-commerce merchant? Then head over to greenwoodconsulting.net to learn how we can help you scale your business.